However, the reason we can't go full, everything can't be a cooperative is, I guess they might say there are two reasons. Again, one, it's ethical. Like, I want to start an enterprise. I'm the boss. I have the idea. So, join me and I'll make you rich. But you have to kind of do what I say at some level. Like, the final say is with me. And then the other answer might be a more pragmatic answer, which also bleeds into that philosophical answer, which is if you do that, we all get phenomenally, the cake grows, we get much richer. So subordinate yourselves, right? Because some of you are morons, right? And you can only, okay, I'm not still manning here, but this is really, I think, the underlying logic. Like, some of you aren't qualified to become the next Jeff Bezos, right? You're not going to go to Princeton and study physics or whatever he did. So I'm very clever and I can increase the pie with my great ideas. And obviously there's an element of truth there, right? Other people are just fit to, mop the floor. But if you do mop the floor at Amazon, you will get much wealthier than, what are you going to do? You're not going to come up with the next Amazon. So therefore that kind of bleeds in. Yeah, that bleeds into an idea of moral desert, right? And what you're worth. How does the anarchist respond then?
Well, there's a lot there. There's a lot of responses there. I mean, in terms of desert, I kind of challenge anyone to say why Jeff Bezos should have more than a nurse or a teacher, or someone who's working on the shop floor. Because I mean, there's a lot of fantasy there, isn't there? The idea that Jeff Bezos kind of earned that money, created that kind of wealth, and then is sharing it with the workforce. When actually, of course, the opposite is true. Jeff Bezos isn't out there delivering all those little parcels. It's the workforce doing that. And the fact that he had an idea, and the fact that he was in the right time and the right place to kind of implement that idea, really, you're talking about, look, this whole kind of capitalist fantasy of this kind of, the incredible entrepreneur who has all this, this kind of this capacity, and they've become the Elon Musk or the Bill Gates because of their genius. And what that does is it disguises the lie of capitalism, the fact that actually it's a brutal world, where the people who, for any number of reasons, and some of them might be, some of them are about a bit of skill or a bit of creativity, but you have that on top of luck, the spatial temporal luck. You're there at the right time, the right place, you do the right things. And this is the thing with capitalism, is once you kind of get ahead, and anyone who's played Monopoly will know this, once you get ahead, then you just keep on getting ahead. And once you've made your kind of first million, it's easier to make your next million. And obviously not everyone becomes still the Jeff Bezos, but there's no for me, there's just no argument that because you've made a million, you should therefore just keep making millions and millions and millions. And Jeff Bezos is not he's not feeding those Amazon workers. They're feeding themselves. They're creating a business that wouldn't exist without all those workers. And I mean, there's so many ways of responding to that, but two kind of fundamental things for me is, one is to say that without Jeff Bezos, maybe we wouldn't have Amazon, but maybe that wouldn't be a bad thing, actually, because if we look at the bigger picture, we've got people starving, we've got people dying because they're eating too much, and we've got a planet that's about to die. And so on just a kind of fundamental level, we're doing things incredibly badly. We're making a lot of mistakes, and so any kind of defense of the status quo needs to acknowledge the shit that we're in, and needs to, if that defense is going to continue, needs to argue why we need something like Amazon. Because often there's a kind of circularity to a defense like that. Is, if we didn't have hierarchy or capitalism, we wouldn't have Amazon. But we don't need Amazon. And so you're kind of defending one thing by defending a product of it. We need capitalism because otherwise we wouldn't have Amazon. But that's not a defense of capitalism. You need to defend Amazon, and the defense of Amazon is it's giving people work, it's providing income for X number of people, and so then the response to that is, well, actually, if you're talking about a basic kind of economic argument, you've got one person who, like you say, is taking such a massive proportion of that pie that he would be able to give everyone, was it £100,000, I think you said, but anyway, it's clear that he's taken a massive proportion of the pie. So why not split the pie up equally? So then the argument becomes, well, you couldn't do that. You couldn't do that if you didn't have the Jeff Bezos. You need that position of power, and that is a pure. That's I love kind of when you hear people who think they're really kind of hard-headed, rational, pragmatic economists, and they'll say, well, you need that Jeff Bezos, because there's no empirical evidence there that you need that Jeff Bezos. Companies start all the time as co-ops. People collaborate to make things. And it doesn't have to be the case that every single person in a co-op does the same thing and has the same role. That's not what workplace democracy is about. You can still have people with great ideas and other people who implement them, but we can decide together and we can share the spoils of our work, saying, well, you had the great idea, but I clean the fucking toilets, so I want half the pie, thank you very much, because your great idea was great, but you had that idea whilst you were having a pint of beer in the pub, and I've been cleaning the toilet all day. So there's no reason why you don't have innovation. I hate that term, but there's no reason why you don't have innovation, why you don't have ingenuity, why you don't have abundance, why you don't have all the sorts of things we've come to absurdly associate with capitalism in a cooperative setting. People still want to, my co-op makes beer. I still want to make nice beer. I still want to kind of create different beers that people like. I don't need to be profiting more than other people to do that. And that's also I think a really kind of powerful idea or a response is, if you need millions of pounds to motivate you to do something, maybe it's not worth doing. If you need that, if this idea that, well, people wouldn't do this work, or we couldn't get these people to do this work if we didn't pay them this absurd, horrific, horrendous amounts of money. Well then, it's almost kind of an acknowledgement that there's something profoundly wrong. Like, don't do it then. If you need someone to receive billions of pounds in order to compensate them for that, then maybe we don't need that work doing in the first place. I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling now because there was just so many.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Let me try and hone in on one, because again, I want to kind of split this interview into like the possibilities of anarchism, responding to these traditional critiques, and then we'll hit the limitations. So I think, yeah, good responses, but then the capitalist, or just like classical liberal, the phrase of the day at the moment, can come back and say, if they're educated, right, they've read their Robert Nozick, and they'll say, the Wilt Chamberlain example. So for people that don't know, the American philosopher Robert Nozick got into an exchange with John Rawls, I guess in the 17th onwards, about basically liberalism versus American libertarianism, so which is much more right wing and free markets, right, pro capitalist, than what we mean by libertarianism in Europe. So Nozick came up with this. Well, it's probably not original, but he says, look, take the example of this famous, I think in the 70s, basketball player Wilt Chamberlain, right? So you talk about David Beckham or Ronaldo or Messi today, right? It's obviously not that simple, but the idea is that, look, people are freely choosing to buy the tickets to go and see Wilt Chamberlain, to see Messi, to see Ronaldo, to see Federer. They're they're buying the shirts, they're buying the boots. And so, Wilt Chamberlain and Lionel Messi, they benefit from each individual's free choice to basically give them loads and loads of money. What's unethical about that? You're saying that I've freely chosen, that Messi is so entertaining, he's the best footballer of all time, I want him to have this money, right? And the market, therefore, is such an efficient mechanism because it rewards him for this immense talent that we all enjoy. Perhaps I'll leave it at that because that's kind of the basis of that capitalist reply.
I mean, I think there are two kind of basic answers to that. One is that's. I mean, obviously Nozick kind of presents that as a thought experiment, but then he uses it to defend an economic system based on that thought experiment. But the two don't translate because that is a thought experiment, and that's not how capitalism works. You know, football superstars don't make their money because everyone walks up to the pitch and puts a pound in a pot. They make their money because 8-year-old children making shoes in Cambodia and being paid less than $1 a day to do that, and then those shoes are being sold for $100 in North America and Europe, and then the companies that take the $99.5 profit from that are then giving some of that money to football teams to advertise their shoes that are being made by people who are effectively slaves, and that's just kind of one leg of that journey. But people who Walt Chamberlain didn't become rich because people were just, it's not a busking situation where people throw money into your kind of upturned baseball cap. There's all sorts of capitalist relations of production and ownership that are going on to make that kind of wealth. So that's one response. The second response is the thought that, if you kind of step away from the reality, and this is what Nozick kind of does in his kind of classic book, Anarchy, State and Utopia, and talks about, it is abstract political philosophy. And then you could say, well, what's wrong with that? And the response to that is, what's wrong with that is not that you have, and this is, you take away all the kind of social reality and questions like, for example, why would you even have a baseball player that suddenly everyone wanted to watch without advertising, without the media? Would it really be the case that, a football player was just so good that everyone in the world would want to come and do that without the paraphernalia, the circus of capitalist sporting industry and the media and so on? Take all of that away for a second and kind of return to the abstract kind of Nozick experiment and say, why shouldn't everyone be able to do that? And the answer is because you then create a social situation that's detrimental to everyone, Walt Chamberlain included. And humans have a legitimate argument to prevent social situations that are detrimental to themselves. And if they don't, Nozick's got a real problem in arguing how and why they don't. Because Nozick, as a libertarian, would say no one has the right to interfere with me as an individual. The paradox of that, and this is the libertarian paradox, and it's the problem that anarchists kind of struggle with when they want to engage with those things on a more honest level, is if I can't interfere with you, you can't interfere with me. And if what you're doing is going to interfere with me, then I can interfere with you to stop your interference. And you kind of get into this kind of circular libertarian nonsensical kind of problem, which is why fundamentally the idea of freedom is in many ways a really unhelpful philosophical tool, because it just leads to too many kind of absurd paradoxes. But to come back to that situation, if a social situation is developing where someone is going to amass a certain amount of wealth, and thereby amass a certain amount of power. And if as a society we see that that dynamic is progressing, and we see the ramifications of that. You know, you see your neighbor building a wall and then building a gun and then building a bigger wall around the river and then building a dam and building more guns. You know, you start to say, hold on a minute, this is going to impact on our society, this is going to impact on us, and as libertarians we're going to stop you doing that because it's interfering with our freedom. And the situation of Walt Chamberlain amassing this money is also amassing power, and it's changing the social dynamic. And people have got, even from a libertarian perspective, a right to change that. In the same way that Nozick would say people have got a right to prevent a large state developing because the development of a large state will infringe on personal liberty. Well, the development of huge personal wealth will inevitably then infringe on personal liberty. So we have, as a society, perfectly legitimate grounds to say this behavior in and of itself isn't detrimental. But taken as a whole, and this is where it's going to be detrimental. And so we're going to navigate our way around that. We're going to say, no, we don't want that situation to develop. I've never heard a libertarian respond to that kind of, to that response, because I think libertarianism is a fundamentally, and as with some anarchism, it's an absurd position, because you can't get around that paradox of you can't interfere with me, but what happens if you do, then I can interfere with your interference.
You can click here to watch the full interview, or you can listen to it on all the major podcasting platforms. The links are down below, or you can just search for Ideas Sleep Furiously. Thank you.